So, late to the bandwagon as always, I recently joined the rest of the gaming world raiding in an effort to defeat the Ark menace, reclaim man's history, and make Topside our home once again. And just in case that sentence made zero sense to you, what I'm trying to say is that I've been playing a lot of Raid Shadow Legends. Wait, hold on, that's not right. What I meant to say is that I've been playing a lot of Ark Raiders, and I've been loving it. Depending on where you venture online though, you might find that not quite everyone is having so much fun. Now, granted, everything you see online should be taken with a grain of salt, especially on a platform where voicing popular complaints is an easy way to farm internet points. But there have been lots of complaints, from PvP players ruining the game, to PvE players ruining the game, to Embark ruining the game with grindy optional expeditions. And while you can probably surmise my feelings about some of these complaints from my tone, I do want to talk about a bigger issue that I feel like is actually ruining the game for the people levying these complaints, and a larger issue that I see within gaming in general. Which, if you've read the title, you may already know where I'm going with this. Ark Raiders, for the majority of these players, is not being ruined by the PvPers or the PvEers or Embark. It's being ruined by the fact that we are all terminally online. If you've been gaming for a while and have played the looter shooter or roguelite styles of games in the past, I want you to think of some of those older games you've played. Destiny 1, The Division 1, Darkest Dungeon, Borderlands 2, the list goes on, but you probably have at least one game that you felt the urge to grind in the days before, let's call it the Overwatch era. Games where even though the in-game loop might not have been fully developed at the time, you felt like you could sink hours and hours and hours into the game. And there's a reason why I'm specifying this time period, because to me, it seems like the Overwatch era was the beginning of a massive shift in gaming culture. Overwatch wasn't just a popular game, it was the game. A game that received industry-wide praise and attracted people from all genres of gaming. But more than that, it turned non-gamers into gamers. It was one of the first times, at least in my adult life, that a video game became pop culture. Games like Destiny and Borderlands 2 before this were extremely popular games with hype releases and large audience, but they were popular among gamers, typically among fans of their genre. And the online environment showed that. Now don't get me wrong, there were still complaints, especially for Destiny, but most of these came from a place of understanding what the game was trying to be and criticizing the areas where it fell short. Because people playing the game were fans of the genre who bought the game because they wanted to experience what the game had to offer. If you bought Destiny 1, yes, you were buying into it because it was a new IP from Bungie, but you were probably also going into it expecting it to be a story-driven looter shooter. But in the modern era of gaming, things have changed. Instead of people choosing their genre and playing games because they like the offering, people are playing games because they're popular. And again, don't get me wrong, there were always bandwagon players that jumped on board of a game because of the fact that it was in the popular zeitgeist. But I think that now things have shifted to the point that the popularity is the entire reason, not just a part of the reason. People want to feel like they're part of the conversation. And for those of us who spend much of our time online, not playing the latest trending game makes you feel like you're missing out on life. So we flock to games in genres we've never played before in hopes of remaining relevant. Video games like Marvel Rivals, Helldivers 2, and now Ark Raiders release much to the same treatment as shows like Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad, where you have to play them in order to keep up in society. On one level, this is a good thing because it exposes players to a genre of games that they may not have considered, and it could potentially add a source of enrichment to their lives when they find a game that suits them. For example, I've always liked cards, but until the release of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, I had no idea just how much enjoyment I could get from playing card games competitively. As a result, I've picked up games like Dragon Ball Fusion World, Magic the Gathering, and in some cases games like Slay the Spire, which veer from the competitive side of things but offer a difficulty level that I find satisfying. And without discovering my love of card games, I may never have picked up Marvel Midnight Suns, a game that I feel was criminally slept on, at least in my online circles. Unfortunately though, not every popular release ends in a player-on genre romance. Sometimes you end up with a popular game receiving complaints from players that it was never designed to please. Which brings us back to Ark Raiders, a game in the extraction category which, among shooters, is one of the more niche subgenres. I mean, for proof, just look at the abysmal view count on my totally flawless review of Call of Duty's DMZ. Totally not my fault, had nothing to do with the poor titling or SEO. But on a serious note, Embark achieved something magical with Ark Raiders. Through a beautiful art style, compelling enemy design, and a streamlining of the usual extraction mechanics, they created a game that makes a super niche and normally difficult gameplay loop attractive to the casual gamer. Meanwhile, they also somehow maintained the integrity of the genre and added enough of their own flavor to attract people already playing games like DayZ and Tarkov. Again, this is a good thing, or at least it should be. But the problem is what happens when expectations collide with reality. Much of the playtime spent near the release of Arc Raiders was new players running into other new players, learning the maps and terrified to be killed by the PvE enemies on the map. So unlike the majority of extraction shooters, a large portion of the player base became friendly. In fact, I joined this game pretty late in the season, and in over 30 hours of gameplay and dozens upon dozens of matches, I have only been killed by other players unprovoked 3 times. And I can actually count on my hands how many encounters have turned hostile in the first place. But if I'm being completely transparent, being shot in the back in one of my early runs by a player that I let live has forever made me cautious when it comes to interacting with others. And one match where I died at extraction from some jerk leaving mines and attracting a rocketeer to the area has led me to always look around and play cautiously when I'm near the exit. Now I know some of you listening hear that and feel bad for me or get angry at the players that are playing in what you would consider to be a scummy way, but personally, I like this twist because it makes the game more interesting when you have to stay on your toes and suss out potential threats. It makes your peaceful interactions more of a shaky alliance than a true friendship. It makes me keep my guns out and keep my eyes trained on fellow raiders. Meanwhile, the fact that most people actually are friendly allows me to be cautiously optimistic in interactions as opposed to other games where I would feel the need to shoot on sight. This, to me, is refreshing, and it reminds me of the early days running missions in the Division's Dark Zone, you know, before it just became PvP one-shot central. And it also just adds a really interesting level of player psychology to the gameplay loop. In fact, I may make another video going a little bit more in depth on the social psychology of this game, but for now, I want to focus on how what I view as the secret sauce of this game has become a case study for why internet culture sucks. On the one hand, you have the PvE players coming from looter shooters and more casual games who have decided that shooting another player is morally wrong, and that for some reason this means that if you're killing someone, you're playing against the developer's intent. And on the other hand, you have some PvP players screaming for the removal of Arc and calling anyone who has an issue with that suggestion a spineless limp noodle that should go back to Stardew Valley. But I would argue that both of these kinds of players are completely missing the point. Placing plentiful topside resources alongside powerful Arc enemies that should unite players, meanwhile giving those players the ability to shoot one another, shows that the developers actually want players to explore both the collaborative and the hostile interactions of life after the apocalypse. If you weren't supposed to shoot people, you wouldn't be able to shoot people. And if the Arc weren't supposed to make shooting people difficult, they would have just made them easy AI like what you get in Fortnite. But the point of the game is that the Arc and the players create a tension that you won't find in other games. It makes the game unique. And I would argue that if your issue is with core elements of the game like the Arc in general or PvP in general, then Arc Raiders probably just is not the game for you. And now we're back full circle on why I feel like the internet is ruining games. Because in the past, if you didn't like a game, you would just stop playing it. But now, because of the internet and the way that internet culture has developed, playing the game is like a prerequisite for existing online, making you feel like you have to keep playing it. Because if you don't play it, FOMO tells you that you're missing out on something that you were supposed to be a part of. So instead of moving on, you torture yourself, playing a game that you don't enjoy, and then you go online and gripe about the core gameplay of an experience that you shouldn't be having in the first place. Meanwhile, you find a circle of other people who are doing the same thing and have the same complaints, and you guys chat it up, confirming your own biases and patting yourselves on the back. So when you finally come across someone with a differing opinion, they aren't just someone with a different opinion, they're an idiot. Because how can they not see what is so obvious to literally everyone else? Even though everyone else here actually just means the people who are in your echo chamber. I find it so strange that among a video game where you can shoot people, where the game is designed for you to shoot people, there has now become a culture war between PvE and PvP players. It doesn't make any sense, but it only exists because of the fact that online people are able to silo themselves off and have these conversations in places where others don't disagree with them. Granted, all this while people like myself who just enjoy the game for what it has to offer slowly start to feel like the online community of this game is toxic, because no one can have an actual conversation without insulting one another. You know, maybe this video is just my long-winded way of realizing I need to stay off Reddit. Well, too late now, the script is already written. Anyway, I guess I'll leave it right there. I just really needed to vent about this because I've been so baffled by the conversations that I've been seeing online. And it really does make me think that 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have problems like this because the people who were talking about the game online were playing the game because they enjoyed the game that they were playing. And the conversations they were having were from a place of love and wanting the game to be better in the genre that the game already existed in. As opposed to now, where people will go online and complain about a game and try to turn it into something it was never intended to be. Ark Raiders was originally a PvE game. Yes, but that doesn't mean that the current vision of the developers is to turn it into a PvE only game. They added PvP because they felt that that matched their vision better, and so it is not a PvE or a PvP game, it is a PvPvE game. And if you're going to play the game, you have to accept that. Maybe sometime down the line they can introduce new modes or things that will give these other players something that they're looking for, but in my opinion, the game truly needs both. Anyway, I guess I'll leave it right there. I do think the internet is a great place. It lets me have fun discussions with viewers like you about things like this, which is why I made this channel in the first place. So with that being said, be sure to leave a comment. I do want to hear what you guys have to say. Let me know how you're feeling about Ark Raiders now that the honeymoon is over. I do think there are reasonable things that we can criticize about this game. I just don't think that the very existence of PvE and PvP is one of them. So again, just let me know what you think in the comments section. Also, be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want more, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.